Vocals, Grant Taylor.
If tomorrow all the things were gone I worked for all my life, and I had to start again with just my children and my wife, I'd thank my lucky stars to be living here today, 'cause the flag still stands for freedom and they can't take that away. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the man who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, from sea to shining sea, from Detroit down to Houston and New York to LA. Well, there's pride in every American heart, and there's time to stand and say that I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the man who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the man who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. God bless the USA.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Ricky Wright, who will lead us in our invocation.
I was honored to be asked to do this, and today's no different than any other day to be proud to be an American and to stand up for America. I want to read something real quick first. It says that it's freedom versus liberty. The Sons of Liberty, the Liberty Tree, the Liberty Bell, the Statue of Liberty. Liberty, liberty, liberty. Our founding fathers were enamored with the idea of liberty. But why? To them it was a sacred trust, a precious possession, a privilege to be stewarded, and a right they would be responsible to give an answer for. Liberty meant everything to them. It was something worth fighting for, and yes, even dying for. It was far more valuable than just mere freedom. So, if I could ask you to bow your heads and let us pray. Father, we love you, and we praise your holy name. Father, though we have turned our backs on you, we ask for your blessings in this country. We have erred in our judgment. but ask that you put us back on the right track. Through your grace and mercy, forgive us, Lord, for our sins, and may we have leaders that fear you, for that's the beginning of wisdom. Lord, may these two candidates fear you and face your wrath if they don't have your blessing and honor you. May they be submissive to your precepts and the reason we have a second chance at being a true godly nation. May we get back to the biblical principles that founded this great nation and allowed us to follow Christ. For exalting Christ as our priest, our king, and our lawgiver gives us peace. For he's the only one who can carry out these three leadership roles, and only if we allow it. Man cannot. We elect these and trust them to do just their portion. Together we will either give you glory or see your anger. Father, again, may we see your glory and give you glory, and may your will be done. Father, nothing more, nothing less, and nothing else. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Tonight's moderator, please welcome from First Street Media, the news director from 104.3 The River, Miss Katie Bartlett.
Thank you, Scott. You may all be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to introduce Congressman Pat Fallon, incumbent. And his Democratic opponent, Amir. Thank you, Congressman Fallon and Ms. Amir, for joining us tonight in Paris, Texas. This debate is being broadcast on myparistexas.com and the Epoch Times on multiple platforms. Should anyone not be able to join us tonight, they'll be able to watch live through those media outlets. Before we start the debate, I'd like to go over a few rules. Firstly, we ask the audience to refrain from any cheering, clapping, or any type of noise until after the debate has come to a conclusion. Candidates, we will start with a 5-minute opening statement from each of you before moving on to tonight's questions. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to answer the questions and a 1-minute rebuttal. Our timer, Rhonda Welch, will say when each candidate's time is up, and there will be a 20-second warning. She will raise the yellow flag for a 20-second warning, and during the rebuttals, you'll have a 10-second warning. Mr. Fallon, we'll start with you with your 5-minute opening statement.
Well, thank you all for being here. And, you know, I read once that the world is run by those who show up. And you all have, because if our republic is going to not only survive but thrive, it needs an engaged citizenry. And it also needs patriots that will remain ever vigilant. And there's a lot to be said for humble beginnings. So many people in this room had those, and I'm one of them. Because when you grow older, you appreciate the blessings that you encounter as your life unfolds. And I grew up in a house that cost $13,000 and recently sold for $75,000. My parents are retired school teachers, and they taught us the value of a hard day's work and what an education can do for you. And my parents also taught me that if you want to succeed and achieve and live your dreams, you best rely on one person, yourself. Because no one else is going to do it for you, and the government sure as heck isn't going to come in there and help you live your dreams either. Too bad too many people peddle that pandering garbage, but it is what it is. So I think a good way to start is to tell you what I believe. I believe in the majesty of the United States of America. And I believe we're the greatest country history has ever known. And I believe in celebrating American exceptionalism. And I believe in capitalism. While obviously it's not perfect, it has proven to be the most efficient economic system that's ever been implemented. And it is responsible, make no mistake about it, it's responsible for ripping mankind, humankind, out of poverty. And I believe in the Constitution of the United States. And I believe our founding fathers were brilliant and that we're following in the footsteps of heroes. I believe in free speech and freedom of expression. And I believe it's being curtailed by the wokeism of big tech and discouraged by the hard left professors and staff at our institutions of higher learning. I believe that we should all worship the Almighty to the dictates of our own conscience. And it's essential for this nation or any nation to secure your borders. Because if your citizens aren't safe, then they're not free. And the closest thing we have to a meritocracy in this world, I believe, is our country. And I believe that, I want to be very clear here, that all lives matter. That each human being was ordained by the divine, and everyone should be treated with dignity and respect. And it's a pity that some American politicians will pit one against the other. And the leftist politicians have become very adroit at identity politics, dividing us based on gender, race, ethnicity, religion, etc. Because these supposed leaders are giving more weight and importance to one group of people over another and elevating them over others. And that's wrong, and it's incredibly dangerous. And I think it's diabolical. And it's tilling fertile fields of where unimaginable horrors and evils may one day spring. So be very careful about that. I spent my entire adult life in the state of Texas, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Texas has a brand. When you go travel overseas and they ask you where you're from, probably say Texas. I don't think if you're from Delaware, you'd say Delaware. But our brand is synonymous with opportunity and promise and prosperity and success and hope. Because in this country, in Texas, in that country, if you work hard and you work hard and you work smart, you're going to achieve your dreams. Because we believe in limited government, low taxes, reasonable regulation. California, Illinois, New York, New Jersey, they've gone another way. And they're all bleeding population. They're bleeding jobs. They're bleeding opportunity to Texas. We gained 2 electoral votes. Florida won. Illinois lost 1. New York lost 1. And for the first time in history, California lost 1. How is that possible when you consider all the things that California has? Perfect weather, that topography, the beautiful Pacific Ocean, the natural resources, all elements that should foster wild success. And instead, they're failing miserably. Because people didn't move to Texas for our refreshingly cool August afternoons. They moved to Texas because we have freedom and liberty, and we value the individual. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Congressman Fallon. Ms. Amir, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening, everyone. As mentioned before, I'm Amir, your Democratic nominee for Congressional District 4. I want to thank our sponsors, our moderator, and thank you all for taking time out of your busy day to join us today to really hear the facts about what needs to happen for our district to move forward. Tonight, if you don't take anything away, I want you to know that I am a teacher. I served in our communities for over 9 years, educating the minds of our future, giving our students the opportunities that they are able to enjoy today. I am the only candidate that has a plan that supports families, business owners, our educators, our law enforcement, our farmers and ranchers, and our senior citizen community here in our mighty district. I support law enforcement and I will pass comprehensive immigration reforms that will strengthen our criminal penalties for people that bring fentanyl into our borders. I want to invest in attracting talent across our district so that we can be able to build our hospitals, our infrastructure, and our communities. And I want to do everything I can to strengthen our district here in Congressional 4. Unlike my opponent, I'm not a career politician that has failed to pass any meaningful legislation to help our district. My opponent has failed to fix the border. He's failed to help our schools. He's failed to help our hospitals, our farmers, our ranchers, our business owners, and the people that build up our local economy here in our district. My opponent, Representative Fallon, has been a complete failure, lacking the political leadership and courage that we need in Congress representing this mighty district. On my opponent's watch, our rights to privacy are under attack. Women's rights are under attack. Crime is on the rise. We don't have enough doctors or hospitals in our district. In our rural communities, our electricity grid is not stable enough to meet our electricity needs. And we don't have adequate internet access in too many of our communities across the district. When I'm elected, I'm going to be your champion, the true guardian of the Constitution, making sure that we go and we protect our rights that are guaranteed to us in the U.S. Constitution. I'm going to make sure that I take my role seriously because our lives matter. The things that happens in our district that makes us grow, those things matter. And they shouldn't be politicized and used as a political pawn to get different points across to pander to certain groups of people that usually do not support the entire majority. It's time for change. And I'm stepping up because I have the ability, the courage, and the mindset to fight for every single one of you. Although I am the Democratic nominee, I plan on representing every single Texan and every citizen of the United States when I'm elected. When elected, you can rest assured knowing that you have somebody who will not mislead you by misrepresenting facts, somebody who's willing to work across both sides to bring us to the middle to come up with solutions and make sure that our children are safe, our communities are safe, and that our police officers are not outgunned and outnumbered on the streets so they can do their jobs to keep our communities safe. Like I said, it's time for change. And Congressional District 4 needs a hero. I'm that person. I greatly and humbly ask for your support, and I also ask for you to vote for me this November. And to my opponent, let's debate.
Thank you, Ms. Amir. I have the questions here in a sealed envelope, which has not been opened before now, and I will have Ms. Welch open that for us. Ms. Amir, we'll start with you for question number 1. You'll have 3 minutes before Congressman Fallon. Ms. Amir, the rate of inflation worldwide and in the U.S. is at a 40-year high. What would you have done differently from the Biden administration, and what would you do differently from this point forward?
Thank you for asking that question. I currently experience the adversity that comes with inflation. I'm an everyday person working a small business, trying to make ends meet. My opponent has failed to introduce or co-sponsor any legislation that would have reduced the cost of gas, prescription medication, and groceries, and he plays a key role in diminishing the Republican stance on being fiscally responsible. Currently, right now, we are experiencing a greedflation, where corporations are able to see the highest profits margins in our history. By driving up the cost of goods while families are being laid off from their jobs and our senior citizens and people that are disabled are stuck on a fixed income that has not been adjusted to inflation. With the GOP's Paycheck Protection Program, it gave billions of dollars to illegitimate business owners, some of them even being elected officials that parlay with our representative today. And these people will not be repaying the taxpayers because their loans have been forgiven. Luckily, the Democrats are right here cleaning up the mess that was left back in 2020 by tracking down those PPP loan scammers and making sure that we get our money back. My opponent continues to support tax cuts for the ultra rich, and which decreases our ability to generate revenue in our district. This corporate welfare is the driving cost of inflation in our district and across the nation. My plan is to pass legislation that makes sure that every single person and every single entity pays their fair share of taxes. We're going to legalize and tax marijuana, which will bring in billions of dollars in revenue, and we will also make sure that we reel back our unnecessary government spending, because when we waste our money, we let the taxpayers down. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Amir. Congressman Fallon, 3 minutes.
Well, first and foremost, I wouldn't have, and I didn't vote for, $4 trillion, which is 4,000 billions of additional spending that the Biden administration was in favor of. When you inject $4 trillion into the economy, goods and services are going to cost more. Talk to any responsible economist, and they will tell you that. And my esteemed opponent is blaming me for everything, it seems, including, I didn't hear her say the bubonic plague or COVID, but that may be coming. The fact of the matter is the Democrats right now control all levers of government, and they have for 2 years, and it's interesting how they don't want to own the current situation. There are more Democrats in the House of Representatives than there are Republicans, and the same in the Senate, and they have the White House. So as far as passing good legislation, that'll happen. It's not going to happen until November 8th, because Nancy Pelosi is not going to let Republicans pass any meaningful legislation. However, I do have more experience, and she says career politician, which I also find interesting. I'm 54 years old. And I've never been paid to do a job in the elected office until I got to Congress. If you consider $7,200 a year in the Texas legislature being paid. But when I was in the Texas legislature, of which, incidentally, you want to talk about crossing the aisle, 99% of the bills we pass in the state of Texas have at least some bipartisan support. Press will never tell you that, but that is the case. The Republicans are the senior partner in the state, but we do work well together because not everything is partisan. I passed 68 bills out of the Texas Senate when Nancy Pelosi wasn't the presiding officer. So I'm looking forward to November 8th. $4 trillion, 8.3% inflation, 40-year high inflation. And what inflation is, at the end of the day, it's a tax on everything that we need and on everything we buy for all of us. We're 14%, everybody in this room, most of us, are 14% poorer than we were when Joe Biden took office. That's not a good thing. Gas is 64% higher. Utilities are 33% more. Electricity, 16% more. Food, 14%. Eggs, 39%. Staples like milk, 17%. Real wages are down 3%. You're going to pay $1,400 more for gasoline this year, and you're going to have 5,000 real dollars less than you did last year. That's the Democrats. They got to own that. Donald Trump hadn't been in office for 2 years. Can't blame him. I know some people in this room were going to want to, but they can't. And then the Inflation Reduction Act, the Joint Committee on Taxation, which is bipartisan, says that folks making under $200,000 next year are going to pay $17 billion in taxes, in additional taxes, than what they paid before. And the deficit will not be reduced at all through at least 2026.
Ms. Amir, 1 minute.
Yes, so I find it hilarious that he says these things, because my opponent, while he talks about the $4 million that the Democrats wanted to pass along, my opponent introduced a bill that would have taken $4 billion from taxpayers to reimburse Governor Greg Abbott, for the border crisis that he failed to address. Once again, my opponent introduced a bill to reimburse Texas $4 billion for Operation Lone Star, which everybody has noted as a complete failure. Once again, my opponent continues to fail to pass meaningful legislation. Yes, you can file a bill if you want to, but if nobody supports it, if nobody thinks it's a good bill, it does not benefit us. Instead of us trying to take $4 billion from the taxpayer, we could have used that money to address education. He could have introduced a bill that would have addressed real inflation. And if he wanted to address inflation and the gas prices, he should have voted for the gas price and gouging bill.
Congressman Fallon, 1 minute.
You know, I hope that as we move on in this debate, we get beyond socialist drivel and meaningless, unspecific rhetoric, because that's all we're getting. It's not good, and nobody's getting smarter because of it. I mean, it's terrible. The fact of the matter is that hell yes, I filed a bill to reimburse Texas for billions of dollars because the federal government's job is to secure the border and protect the border. And there's a gross dereliction of duty, and they have abdicated their responsibility in doing so. You want to talk about the border? The drug cartels and Joe Biden, if the drug cartels could have gone to the White House and written a plan out for Biden, it's exactly what they want him to do. He's doing it. We've had 19 months in a row of 150,000 illegal border crossers. Venezuela right now is flushing its prisons and sending their prisoners, their murderers, their rapists to the country. Clearly, there's a lot of wonderful Venezuelans that just want to get out of that country and flee socialism. But we don't know who these folks are.
I would like to jump in because the information that he's presenting is
Ms.
completely
Amir,
false.
please refrain from rebutting. Thank you, Mr. Fallon. Let's move on to question number 2. Mr. Fallon, we'll start with you. Approximately 1 in 10 Americans are currently uninsured. What would you do to expand healthcare availability and affordability to all Americans?
Well, you know, healthcare is very expensive, very complex, and it's also something that I think Americans do very well. When people say universal healthcare, what does that mean? It means free healthcare. And there's no such thing as free healthcare. There's no such thing as anything free. Somebody's going to have to pay for it. And we're seeing historic deficits. We have a debt that's over $31 trillion, and yet the Democrats don't. They just hit the gas pedal about spending. We want things that are free, things that are free. Well, they're not. And by the way, universal health care doesn't work all that well, but we'll get to that in a second. But one of the things that I wanted to focus on for particularly our district is telemedicine. What we've seen there, you know, COVID was a big giant cloud, but there were some, fortunately, silver linings in that cloud. And one of them, what we saw with, you can get some business done, you don't have to be in person. You know, a lot of people were on Skype and doing things online, and medicine was one of those things. And you can use, particularly when you're in hard-to-reach areas and you're not around population centers, you can use telemedicine. And I co-sponsored legislation, H.R. 3371, to do just that. And then also H.R. 4390. We need to try to do everything we can to reduce the cost of prescription drugs. But make no mistake about it, the free market is the best way to do that. You want to look at socialized medicine. People again say universal health care. The United Kingdom has had that for decades. And currently, right now, there are 4.3 million people that are on a surgery waiting list in Great Britain. 1 out of every 5 cancer patients has to wait 60 days to even begin treatment. So just let's personalize this for a second. If you were that person that got a cancer diagnosis, and cancer has touched everybody in this room, I just lost my dad to it a few months ago, and then you have to wait 60 days of hell before you can even start the treatments and start the battle, because you have to ration health care when it's quote-unquote free. And 30,000 people in Great Britain just last year died while they were on those waiting lists. So universal health care is not the silver bullet that the left will have you believe it is. We also sponsored H.R. 19, which is going to lower costs, and it injects more competition to drive down prescription drug costs. H.R. 3461, which prevents price gouging from health insurers for out-of-network services. It's those kinds of things that we need to take a proactive and realistic approach to health care and not sit there and score political points by telling naive folks that they're going to get things for free and everything's going to be awesome. And by the way, I find this interesting. It's going to be free and we're going to give you more of it, but it's going to be cheaper. I mean, that's just ridiculous and it's patently absurd. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Fallon. Mr. Amir, 3 minutes.
So talk about being vague, you guys. So in Texas, we have the highest rate of uninsured individuals, not only just children, but adults and senior citizens. I don't think that's great. Right now, veterans have to schedule 90 days in advance to get health care, to receive get an appointment for health care. That's not good. We also have where our opponent has failed to vote for reducing insulin for our opponents. Nothing is free in this country. And my opponent continues to like to understand that we want affordable and quality health care. Nobody ever said anything free because in this country, nothing's ever free. Since he's been in Congress, he's voted on other health care legislation that would have helped us. The CARES Act, which protected our ambulance services in our rural counties here in District 4. He voted against the Veterans PACT Act, which would have expanded health care for veterans that were exposed to burn pits. And he also, like I mentioned before, voted against the Affordable Insulin Now Act. These are all legislations that would have helped people right here in our district. But like I mentioned, he lacks the political courage and leadership to step away and do what's right for us, the people. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to make sure that the first bill I file is going to be a medical infrastructure bill that will make sure that we build hospitals and healthcare facilities across rural Texas. If you drive 30 miles towards Clarksville, Texas, you will notice that there is a hospital that just has a shell. Those people in Red River County have to come all the way here to seek medical attention. During COVID and during the pandemic, many people died because they did not have access to health care. But my opponent doesn't know that because he doesn't visit these areas. He doesn't come to places like this. This is probably one of the few times he's visited Paris, Texas.
Wow.
So when I pass my bill, this will be able to make sure that we have access to quality and affordable health care. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Amir. Mr. Fallon.
Well, you
1
know,
minute.
again, this is a debate, and it's a political debate. Unfortunately, there's going to be spin, and sometimes just outright falsehoods. And I'm just going to chalk it up to her naivete and not saying that she knowingly just misled everyone here. I've been to Paris, Texas, 45 times probably in the last 2 years. How many times have you been here? Once?
No, I've been here many more
Well, you're not going to be back because
yeah.
here's the bottom line. You want to talk about beyond honesty. You want to talk about candor. You want to talk about, I know some of the liberals are going.
45 times.
Fact of the matter is, this election for this district and this seat is already over. She's going to lose by somewhere between 30 and 35 points. You could have the best candidate in the world. You could have Tony Blair right there. It's just the way things are in this district. And I could be the new coming of Ronald Reagan, or I could be the worst candidate in the world. It doesn't matter. I'm not here because I'm worried about winning or losing in November. I'm here because it's fun to have 300 people engaged in the process, whether you agree with somebody or not, because the best thing you can do is befriend folks that don't agree with you politically, because it makes you both better.
Thank you, Mr.
People
Fallon.
suffering
Ms.
is not
Amir.
fun. So people suffering in our community is not fun, and I find it highly offensive that he says he likes to do this for fun. Your lives, your health care, is not something that should be taken lightly. And that's the problem with my opponent. My opponent said something very, very similar to another person I heard, where he said he can go to the middle of Central Park and shoot anybody and you all will still vote for them. It's no different than that. The people here in District 4 deserve to have somebody that they can trust, somebody that actually cares about what they're doing and their role for this district. And being able to say that you came here 45 times in the last 700 plus days, honestly, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Amir. This next question, you'll answer first.
Okay.
Do you favor mandatory masking, vaccinations, and vaccine passports as preventative tools during a pandemic or epidemic? So, in the middle of the pandemic, at times, depending on where I was, I wore a mask. Sometimes I opted not to wear a mask. But the key right there is that I had the choice.
The same thing with the vaccine. When the vaccine was made available, I didn't run to go get a vaccine the first time, but I took it when I felt ready because it was my choice. So when it comes to having vaccinations and COVID masks and COVID mandates, those things are all up to the people. We have the right to our bodies. And the U.S. Constitution protects our rights to our body. Now, should we do these things in the middle of a pandemic? I would suggest that you don't, because several people, thousands of people, died in our district alone because they did not wear those masks. But it's all up to us. We have the right to choose what we want to do with our bodies. The government's job is to provide the resources that you need. Just like we provided the vaccine for those who wanted to take it, just like we provided masks for those who wanted to wear it. So ultimately, I will not regulate anybody's body and regulate what they decide to do with their bodies. If the resources are there and they can utilize it, as long as we make it available, it's up to each individual to make those choices. My choice is to stay alive, so I'm going to follow what the medical professionals say so that I can be able to maintain my health, and I will encourage those around me for them to maintain their health, to do what is advisable, and they make the decision based on the facts and the knowledge that's provided for them. During the pandemic, so many lives could have been saved if we had clear instruction. And my opponent and his friends, they all played a part in misinforming people, politicizing, our health like they do currently now, and many people died. Unfortunately, I lost a family member, and I know several people in here lost family members in that pandemic. So in the future, what I will hope is that we listen to our medical professionals, that we act early instead of waiting months and months to finally decide to do something when it's too late, and that we make sure that we do everything, that people are well educated and have the information so they can make the right choices. I don't want to regulate anybody's body. I don't want anybody regulating my body. So when it comes to the mask mandates, the COVID vaccine, and the vaccination rate mandates, it's your choice, your body.
Thank you, Ms. Amir. Mr. Fallon, 3 minutes.
Thank you. My opponent just said or claimed that I specifically misled someone on medical issues. I'd love for her to say specifically in her rebuttal what that was, because I don't remember ever doing that, never would. When you mix politics and medicine, you're going to get two results: bad politics and bad medicine. And that's exactly what we've seen over the last few years. What we need to be doing after November 8th, because the Democrats haven't taken this seriously, is finding out the real origins of COVID. Because it seems far more likely to me, in all the indicators, there's no smoking gun, to be clear and to be fair, but it seems very, the preponderance of the evidence that COVID originated from a Wuhan lab. It was leaked accidentally by the Chinese communists. I don't think it came from a bat in a wet market. Now there's some people that might want to side with the Chinese communists. I'm 54 years old, and I've noticed something about communists. They lie a lot. The Soviets did it, and the Chinese do it. If it was a bat in a wet market, why didn't they welcome that WHO? Why didn't they welcome the international community, much like South Africa did when we had the, I believe it was the Delta variant? They said, I don't know what's going on here, please help us. China didn't do that. China obfuscated it. I know CNN is doing their very best to be an apologist for that evil communist regime, but I will call it for what it is. Now, the U.S. dollars also, I want to know if U.S. tax dollars were sent to Wuhan for gain-of-function research. Seems indicated that that's the case as well. I don't know why, I'm on the Oversight Committee, I don't know why we haven't had hearings on this. It's one of the most devastating things that we've seen in the last couple of years. So Democrats should demand that we have those committee hearings as well. We haven't. So let's look at California, other states that took a very severe approach to COVID. They said, I don't care if your 100-year business will fail, go to your basement, you're essential, you're not. So they said, right? And I suspected once we got data, they would show that that was a very naive and short-sighted approach. Well, we have some data now after 2 years. So here it is. Let's take Florida and New York, compare them. They took very different approaches to COVID. There were 81,000 COVID deaths in Florida out of 21 million people for a rate of 0.0038%. New York, 72,000 deaths, 19.5 million population for a death rate of 0.0037%. Almost exactly the same. Texas, 89,000 deaths, 28,600,000 people, 0.0031%. Illinois, shut it down, locked it down, 40,000 deaths, 12.8 million people. Death rate, 0.0031%. Exactly the same as Texas. We could have been free and fought COVID. But the Democrats didn't want to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fallon. Ms. Amir, 1 minute.
I like to go back to my original argument where I say he's not here that often, because if he was here like we were, we saw that people weren't wearing masks. We did what we wanted to do with our bodies. So him saying that we had the shutdown, we didn't have a shutdown like other states. Trust, I know. And when it comes to people lying, people like my opponent, I've known to lie to me all my life. They tell you one thing that is not true and then try to force it to you like it is true. Research has shown that it did not, this COVID, wherever it originated from, didn't come from some lab. It came from other sources that we don't know. But once again, he is misrepresenting the information and the facts. What we do need to know, though, is moving forward that we have to have medical research, and we need to put investments into clinical research to prevent disease and support our epidemiologists so that they can be able to come up with emergency plans so that when something like this happens another 100 years from now, our descendants and our grandchildren are well prepared.
Thank you, Mr. Amir. Mr. Fallon, 1 minute.
I asked if my esteemed opponent would be specific as to how I misled somebody on medical issues. She declined to share anything like that. I have been here, and I do remember in March of 2020, in March, where Texas did shut down, and it shut down for a few months. And this is Texas, so we opened that back up much sooner than states like California, Illinois, New York, New Jersey, et cetera. And as far as being here 45 days, if you want to know the math on that, I started running for Congress in May of 2020, and that's about 130 weeks. If I were here 45 times, it would be once every 3 weeks, and that's probably about what it was. I can't say for sure. It might be 39, but it's around there, and many people in this room can attest to that. So it's just petty and weird, but at the end of the day, I didn't say that I know for sure that was leaked in a lab, COVID. I suspect it was. The preponderance of the evidence seems to indicate to me that it was. That's why you have investigations and you have committee hearings to find out the truth.
Thank you, Mr. Fallon. For this next question, we'll begin with you, Mr. Fallon. Since Roe v. Wade has been overturned and the power to regulate abortion has been placed with the states, do you support any federal regulation of abortion or leaving the issue with the states? And at what point in the pregnancy would you no longer consider abortion as an option other than when the mother's life is endangered?
Thank you for the question. So Roe v. Wade was, I think Ruth Bader Ginsburg even alluded to this, was wrongly decided long ago because the Constitution clearly does not mention abortion. Our Constitution then states if it's not mentioned in the Constitution, it is what? 10th Amendment left up to the states. So it should have been a states' rights issue. There were many states back, and I believe Roe was in the early 70s, 1972, that had already legalized abortion. It was a state decision. So I supported HB 2 in this Texas legislature, which was an omnibus pro-life bill that banned abortion past 5 months. That's what we thought we could get passed and would stand up to judicial muster. I think that it is, and I did actually, because I'll be honest here, and again, candid, that there may have been legislation that I mistakenly signed on into in Congress, because I really truly believe it's a state issue. I don't think the federal government has any business in it, and I believe life begins at conception. I have exceptions to that personally, just like Ronald Reagan had, which was life of the mother, rape, and incest. And now everybody that is right of center agrees with me on that. That's why we have 2 trillion brain cells between our ears to decide for ourselves where our moral compass is. So I think abortion is atrocious and it's evil, and there's many millions of lives that could have been lived. And I would love to know, and again, I probably won't get a straight answer, does my opponent believe that partial birth abortion should be legal? Does she believe that abortion should be allowed in the 3rd trimester? Does she or the many people in this audience believe that you should murder a baby the day before it comes out of a mother's womb? There's many people that truly believe that. Hillary Clinton wouldn't stand up and be courageous. So where does it? It's a contentious issue. The Europeans, by and large, have said 15 weeks is their line of demarcation. I don't think we should do that on the federal level. I don't trust the federal government as much as seemingly some people in this room do. Texas had a trigger ban, so abortion is no longer legal in the state of Texas. And if you don't like that, then change your state legislature. But I would never leave Texas. And I think that, again, life begins, personally for me, life begins at conception, and pretty clear.
Thank you, Mr. Fallon. Ms. Amir. Ms. Amir, 3 minutes.
So I have a friend who carried her first child all the way to 9 months. The day before she was going into labor, there was complication. And come to find out, the baby was under distress, and unfortunately, 24 hours right before she was supposed to have her baby, the baby died in the womb. The doctor gave her an option. She could go ahead and remove the baby, which would be considered an abortion, or she could choose to have the baby and give birth to a stillborn. And unfortunately, my friend decided to go ahead and just have the baby stillborn. She still took the pictures and everything. So I say that to say that the idea that people think that women carry babies for 9 months in their womb, after reading to them, kissing their tummy, rubbing the tummy, talking and consoling and being with the child for 9 months, the idea that women would just decide to have an abortion at the last minute is not only insulting, but it trivializes the pain and suffering that women go through every day.
Can you please stop the timer?
My opponent...
We ask the audience, please refrain from clapping and cheering. That is everybody, yes. You may start the timer again, thank you.
My opponent also doesn't understand the Constitution. Because if he understood the Constitution and actually read it, he will understand that when we restrict women's rights to abortion and when we take away their right to bodily autonomy, we violate their 14th Amendment right that protects their privacy. Not only do we violate their 14th Amendment right, we also violate their 4th Amendment right against unnecessary searches, unreasonable searches, and seizures. Not only do we do that, but now that Texas and this trigger law that he talks about will criminalize women on the saddest day of their lives, that is a violation of our 8th Amendment right, which is protecting you from cruel and unusual punishment. And guys, it's cruel and unusual to punish a woman who had a miscarriage. My opponent stands for everything against women's rights. When women lost their rights, he was on the steps of the Supreme Court celebrating. Check his Twitter. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to make sure that I protect all of our rights. Because ladies, if they take these rights away today, tomorrow is taking away the right for us to work. No. It's taking away the rights for education. Honestly. And it becomes a slippery slope. And he laughs now because he doesn't take it seriously. He doesn't have daughters he has to protect. So these rights impact every single one of us. And we have the right to choose. We have the right to our body. And as guardian of the Constitution, I'm going to make sure we protect these constitutional rights that are guaranteed to every single person, man and woman.
Thank you, Ms. Amir. Mr. Fallon, 1 minute.
We have entered into the realm of the hyperbolic. And that's just lazy when you say things like that. I don't even want to repeat it. It was so inane.
Yeah, because he doesn't know.
No, that's not your turn. I've never interrupted you. I would appreciate it if you don't do the same, if you will be respectful. If you actually read the Texas trigger ban, you'd realize that it does not criminalize women, but you probably didn't. If you'd be honest about it, I don't know if you will, or you just claim that you have. She still hasn't, and will not, by the way, answer the question. Do you think it should be legal for a woman to have an abortion in the 3rd trimester? Do you think it should be legal? Because I answered the question directly. Do you think it should be legal for a woman to have an abortion the day before she used to give birth? Do you think it should be legal for a woman to have a partial birth abortion? You didn't answer any of those questions.
Ms. Amir, 1 minute.
I answered the question. I support the women's right to choose and the right to their bodily autonomy as guaranteed to us in the U.S. Constitution. The government does not have any right to regulate a woman's body at any stage of their lives. So I understand that he feels that the states or whoever should have the right to tell you, grown people and children, what to do with your lives, but it doesn't. God gave us right to free will, and that free will is for everything, not just what my opponent and his friends want to believe is our rights. It's written in the Bible, we have freedom to free will.
Thank you, Ms. Amir. For this next question, we'll start with you. Should there be any restrictions on gun ownership, such as red flag laws, age limitations for purchase, or waiting periods? You have 3 minutes.
Oh, me?
Amir, yes,
Oh,
we're
sorry,
starting
my
with
bad.
you with this one.
Okay. So, once again, as the guardian of the Constitution, let me read the Second Amendment to you all. A well-regulated militia, being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That is what the Constitution says. But the most important part is the well-regulated militia. That means that, one, for me to believe in these words, we have to understand that for our police officers to keep our communities safe, they can't be outgunned in the streets. In the last 10 years, Texas has suffered over 20 gun violence here in our state. Two of them killed over 20 people, and 19 children were killed in a school where an 18-year-old was able to legally purchase a gun, walk into a school, and shoot the students and their teachers. Many of these students weren't even able to be identified except by what they wore to school that day. And on the other side of that door were police officers who did not have the training, who are looking for guidance on what to do to keep those people safe. And unfortunately, they were failed because they were outgunned. What we have to do is that we have to keep guns out of the hands of children that are not ready and mature enough to have these weapons. We need to make sure that we have enhanced background check, which most people agree, whether you're on the left or the right. We also need to make sure that people who are not stable and who are a threat to themselves and others aren't able to access these guns, because children die, women die, we lose our brothers in blue to gun violence as well. And those people lose fathers, wives, mothers, and parents. So it is our duty to uphold the Second Amendment by making sure that we do not have people just having all types of outgunning our police officers until they can make our community safe, and they can make sure that we are able to walk into our schools, into our grocery stores, and to other places without the fear of being shot up and being identified by your shoes.
Thank you, Ms. Amir. Mr. Fallon, 3 minutes.
Thank you. My opponent said that she believes in free will for all people, except, of course, if that's a nine-month-old baby about to be born and coming through the birth canal. No free will there, because she said, she did answer the question. She believes it should be legal to murder that baby. I think that's disgusting. So here's the Constitution that my opponent says that I've never read. I carry it around with me in my pocket all the time. And it is a Second Amendment. I don't need to open it. It says, shall not be infringed. I found it interesting that 60% of Americans now believe, actually it was a month ago, believe that crime was one of their major issues. Politico just did another poll, and it's up to 75% is a major issue. We have the right to self-defense. I have a colleague, she's one of the squad, a very, I think, socialist, communist, named Cori Bush, who does not want you to have the right to own a gun. But she just spent $500,000 last year on private security of men that carry guns to protect her. So apparently her life is more important than anybody in this room. I want women to be able to carry guns to protect themselves, because incidentally, not only do children and women die of gun violence, so do men. In fact, it's way more men than women. So in 2019, because we need to talk, you talk about the Second Amendment, and you want to talk about Second Amendment infringers, you should also talk about crime. It's one of the reasons why we own firearms. Why do we carry firearms? It is a tool. It is a tool. A screwdriver can murder a person. It's a tool. That's not its intended use. A gun, yes, you can use it for hunting and you can use it for self-protection. But you know why it was written in the Constitution? To protect you from your government. Because most governments in this world today, now I don't have to go back to 1930 or 1500, today are authoritarian, evil regimes that restrict the rights of the people. It can happen here, ladies and gentlemen. That's why at the beginning I said we need patriots that will remain ever vigilant. So 2019 to 2022, the major cities police association, New York, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Baltimore, D.C., and Atlanta have experienced an uptick in murders, 50% more in 3 years. Aggravated assaults, 36% more. Defund the police movements are dangerous. And the people that are harmed the most when you defund the police are people of color. 234 police officers have been shot this year. We've lost 45 of them. Make a decision. Do you want to defund the police or do you want to defend the police? Because there's many people in Congress on the other side of the aisle that to this day are doubling down and tripling down on defunding our heroes in blue. If you're not safe, then you're not free.
Thank you. Ms. Amir, 1 minute.
So I just want to remind my opponent that my name is Amir, not Cori Bush. I know we might kind of look alike, but my name is Amir, and you're debating me. So let's talk about gun violence in our country, right? Gun violence costs Texas $16 billion a year. $16 billion. Not only that, but like I mentioned, we have more AR rifles and semi-automatic, high-capacity weapons on our streets than our police officers. He talks about defund the police, but we don't have police officer training that can be able to protect themselves against these high-capacity rifles. He talks about we don't want to protect our communities, but he's not even in the community to know what's going on. We have never even had a mass shooting in Congressional District 4, and that's the way I want to keep it. And what he fails to realize is that gun safety is public safety. And when we choose not to do, and we choose not to make sure, when we choose not to make sure that the guns that are on our streets are something that are compatible to what the police officers can fight against, then it makes puts everybody in danger.
Mr. Fallon, 1 minute.
When you take away people's rights, law-abiding citizens' rights to carry a firearm, you make the world a more dangerous place. Because law-abiding citizens follow the law. Criminals don't. You can pass all the legislation you want, and the good people go hand in their guns, and the bad guys still going to keep the guns. Therefore, we're all at more risk. 50 years ago, most people in this room, right or left, would probably think that 50 years ago, the country was safer. It wasn't. It's the fact that we have 500 channels and an internet that makes it seem less safe. I'm not saying it's super safe, but it's actually safer now than it was then. Statistics, again, sorry to inundate you with data, but this is the way debate should be, not just rhetoric. 50 years ago, there were 180 million guns in this country, and the murder rate was 9.6 per 100,000. Today, there are 400 million guns, so it should be, if guns are the culprit, it should be more dangerous. It's 6 per 100,000. We're actually safer now than we were 50 years ago.
Thank you, Mr. Fallon. We'll begin with you, Mr. Fallon, for this next question. Should there be any limitations on drilling for oil or natural gas or on coal mining? Why or why not? You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I want to correct the record, too. The burn pits that my esteemed opponent, who is not Cori Bush, and I know that, of course, said that I voted against. The final bill actually voted for it. So, again, you didn't do your research. Energy, $2.38 a gallon. That's what we all paid January 20th, 2021. It's now, on average, actually a little higher, but as of a few days ago, it was $3.91, 64% increase. What did Joe Biden do the first day he was in office? Killed the Keystone XL pipeline, which would have supplied 830,000 barrels of oil to the United States and Canada a day. For frame of reference, it's 100 million. The world uses about 100 million barrels a day. We produce about 15 million barrels in this country, and we use about 20 million barrels. And he said no to almost 1% of the total world capacity. That was absolutely asinine. And what did he say yes to? The Nord Stream 2 Russia pipeline. Let's let Russia throw out a bunch of natural gas to Germany. That was a really good idea that he has now retracted because Putin is a dangerous SOB, which we've seen with his murderous rants and war in Ukraine. 11,000 high-paying jobs were also killed when Joe Biden did that. And then in his first week, he said, you know what, we're not going to issue any more new leases on federal lands and waters. In fact, we are using less acre-feet of federal lands and waters for oil and gas exploration than we have since World War II. Economy's grown a little bit since World War II to today. That's remarkable. And what does he do? Let's talk about political expediency. And I do have to talk about Joe Biden and the Democrats because you would be voting for Nancy Pelosi to be the Speaker of the House, and you would be supporting Joe Biden's policies, so we can tie them together. And you can certainly tie me together to the Republicans in Congress. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve, 1975, was created for acts of God, national emergencies, or war. And President Trump, at its height during his administration, was 695 million barrels. Today, well, actually, last week, it was 416 million barrels, a 40% reduction, and it's less now. But Joe Biden did sell 5 million barrels to China, our greatest adversary, second largest economy in the world. And they have almost 1 billion barrels in their reserve because they don't use it for political expediency. So I filed legislation to make it a literal act of Congress if you wanted to tap into the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. That should be bipartisan legislation. I don't want Republicans or Democrats using it as a tool to try to reverse a trend in a midterm election that they're about to lose, and lose badly in the House of Representatives.
Thank you, Mr. Fallon. Ms. Amir?
Once again, I want to remind my opponent, my name is Amir. I am not Joe Biden. I mean, I could be his granddaughter, but I'm not Joe Biden either. He's debating me. And my opponent has failed to introduce, as he mentioned, any legislation that would maximize our energy efficiency and secure our energy independence from foreign resources. We need an all-above strategy when it comes to our energy generation and energy consumption. My opponent wants you to rely on one sole source of energy, which we don't have to. It's limited. It's not reliable in extreme weather, as we saw during the freeze last year. We need to explore all our energy resources, especially here in Texas, where we have a great geographic location. We have the highest wind rate. We have high sun exposure, especially during the summer, our summer months, which tends to be almost half the year, more than half the year. We have an opportunity here to generate so much energy in so many different forms. We also need to make sure that we address his failure in our energy situation to make sure that we don't make this an environmental and national security issue. Right now, with climate change and what's going on with us not being able to maximize our energy resources, our farmers and ranchers are losing crops. They're losing their farms, they're losing their livestock because they can't keep their animals fed and they can't continue to water the grass. We have to do something, and if we don't do anything, it's going to impact our farmers and ranchers. It's going to impact us because it's going to reduce our food source, and then prices will continue to rise. But that's the kind of thing that my opponent depends on because he likes to blame the Democrats for the economic failure, even though he's been in office for 2+ years and has done absolutely nothing to address these issues. Even when he was a state senator, he could have brought energy resources here to our state. He did not. As a congressman, he continues to follow the same pattern. And if we re-elect him for the future, we can just expect more of what we get, a whole bunch of nothing.
Thank you,
Well,
Ms.
I
Amir.
wish my opponent knew that it's not 2+ years, it's 20 months. And the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine. Renewables can be a part of a comprehensive approach into the future, but it's not the sole solution. And neither are unicorns real, or mermaids, or leprechauns. 80% of the U.S. energy is dependent on, right now, oil, natural gas, and coal. That's a fact. Last 20 years, the United States has reduced emissions by 20% more than any other country. Between 2005 and 2017, we have reduced our emissions by 758 million metric tons. The EU, 770 million metric tons, and they have 440 million people. But at the same time, China has increased their emissions by 3 billion metric tons, and India by 1 billion metric tons. What are we doing here? Where are the college protests in America about what China and India are doing? They just keep hammering their own country. You want to talk about solutions to energy? Nuclear energy is a very viable solution moving forward.
Ms. Amir, 1 minute.
As I mentioned before, I know my opponent was not listening. He fails to listen to the people that he represents. We need an all-above combined strategy that is reasonable and responsible so that we can transition to maximize our energy production. That's all we're saying. We need more sources of energy. We cannot solely rely on gas because gas is limited. If we only use gas, you all, it's going to run out. So we have to maximize our other sources of energy, which include solar, wind, hydropower. These are the things that people across the world are doing to be able to address the climate issues. Also, we do not need to be in an energy headlock with OPEC and these other countries that are putting us in a situation where we depend on them. My opponents support these organizations that import these types of foreign oils that they're selling to us. They're the ones who are funding his campaign. So please understand, you all, we have to maximize our energy resources to become energy independent.
Thank you, Ms. Amir. We'll begin with you, Ms. Amir, for this next question. Since crime rates and public safety in the U.S. are major concerns for most voters, where do you stand on cashless bail and funding or defunding the police? 3 minutes.
So, we live in a country that the criminal justice system is predicated on the idea that you are innocent until proven guilty. That is the criminal justice system that we have. That is the criminal justice system that we support. The bail system doesn't do that. It keeps people in jail if they don't have the money to afford. So what I am against is us wasting our taxpayer dollars to jail people that have not committed violent crimes or violent actions. If DA offices are able to prove that they more than likely committed a crime because they have evidence that they pose a threat and danger to our communities, they should be locked up. I want criminals to be held accountable, I want criminals to be held accountable for the things they do and for the violations they bring, and especially if they're violent in our communities. When it comes to defunding, I do not believe in defunding the police. That is crazy talk. We have to make sure that our police officers are not outgunned by criminals on the streets because we have just free will to carry whatever rifle and we can ambush police officers like they've been ambushed in the past week or so. We need to make sure that police officers are well trained. We need to make sure that we limit the scope of their duties. Right now, police officers do everything from catching a cat in the tree to chasing and knocking down doors to do a drug bust. That's too much responsibilities. We have to limit the scope of our police officers so they can focus on keeping our communities safe. We also need to make sure that they're well paid. With the budget that all of our police officers police departments have, they should be able to increase the salaries of police officers. They should be able to provide training so that they are well prepared for emergencies. Right now, my opponent doesn't agree with that, nor do most Republicans that lead this party. And I'm not saying individuals, I'm talking about the leaders of the community, the leaders of this party. They continue to push this narrative that people, especially people that we are communities, want to defund police. That is not true. I've called the police probably more than you have. So the thing is, when it comes to protecting our communities, we rely on the community. We rely on our community police officers. We rely on the individuals to say something when they see something. But for them to do their job, they have to be adequately funded. And we can't continue to just give them weapons without giving them the proper training that they need to be able to keep our communities safe. When it comes to cashless bail, I believe that we should keep people who commit violent crimes and pose a threat to our communities off the street. I do not want to just let anybody go free, but we don't want to waste our community, we don't want to waste our taxpayer dollars incarcerating people that are nonviolent and have not been proven to commit any crimes.
Mr. Fallon.
Thank you. Just again, set the record straight, my opponent said that I had not signed on to or supported any legislation that would unleash American energy independence. There's been at least 6 pieces of legislation which have done exactly that. So again, you can't believe everything that you read. You can't believe everything that you hear, particularly in a political debate. Also, she keeps talking about AR-15s and rifles, and I own an AR-15, and it has harmed exactly 0 people. And it will not harm you unless you break into my home, and then I will harm you. I will protect my family, and I will do so without hesitation. But what they don't want to let you know is that AR-15s, in fact, all rifles, are responsible for less than 3% of gun crimes. It's handguns that do it, and it's criminals with handguns that do it. You look at cities like Chicago, which we want to do and go the exact opposite direction in. And these are startling statistics. There are 117,000 gang members in the city of Chicago and the greater metropolitan area. That's like bigger than most armies of most nation states. That's remarkable. It's frightening. 55 individual gangs and 747 subfactions of those gangs. No cash bail is one of the worst ideas I have ever heard of, putting criminals back out on the streets. Now, it may make liberals feel better about themselves at cocktail parties, but it puts predators back on the streets and to harm everyone. And by the way, criminals don't give a rat's nuggets whether you're liberal or conservative when they're out to hurt you. They want what you have. They will harm a liberal just as quickly as they'll harm a conservative. I want everybody to be safe and want to limit violence. That's why when we have predators that are convicted of 3 violent crimes, I think in the 1990s that worked, 3 strikes you're out. That was a great idea for violent offenses, for predators. So there's a lot of misgivings, and I've got about a minute left, and I want to share some truths with you about police. It's great to hear that people say that they support the police. I was on a city council. Police and fire, our public safety, are our community's military. You don't want the federal government financing and funding your police and your fire department. That is a local and state issue. Let's not conflate the two. In 2017, Harvard University did a study, because police shootings after George Floyd, it came to the forefront, and we don't want anybody to be harmed, and there's certainly going to be some abuses, and they should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. But in 2017, Harvard did a study, and they found no racial bias in police shootings. 2019, the National Academy of Science did a similar study. They found no racial bias in police shootings. There are 375 million annual encounters that police have with civilians. Less than 1,000 fatalities. You have a 0.0000002% of having a fatal encounter with a police officer. And if you comply with their instructions, it's statistically 0 regardless of your color.
Thank you, Mr. Fallon. Mr. Amir, 1 minute.
So my opponent has pretty much shown that he's out of touch and does not truly understand what goes on in our communities. When it comes to violence against police officers, once again, our police officers are usually attacked by high-capacity, semi-automatic weapons. That's what the facts show. We cannot allow our police officers to be outgunned. We cannot allow our police officers to be set out here without the proper defense. I do not want military-style weapons that are able to pierce bulletproof vests on our streets. That's currently what we have. And even though my opponent is a proud carrier of one, I don't want to take away your weapons. What I want to do is I want to keep it out the hands of those that will harm our communities, harm our police officers, because that right there is what keeps our communities safe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Fallon, 1 minute.
I was getting to some statistics I want to continue to share. Interactions with police. They show incredible professionalism and restraint on a grand scale. Again, you're always going to get your bad apples, and I've encountered people that shouldn't be police officers. But 99.9% of the folks that I've encountered and that you see through statistics do a fabulous job. In 2018, there were 58,866 police officers that were assaulted. Have you ever seen any stories about them on CNN or MSNBC or the like? No, because it doesn't fit into their very narrow narrative. And of those 58,866 police officers, 15,000 of them had to go to the hospital to seek treatment for the assaults. And then you couple with the fact that less than 1,000 fatal encounters with police officers, it is absolutely remarkable that the restraint and professionalism that they show.
Thank you, Mr. Fallon. This is our final question of the night. We'll begin with you, Mr. Fallon. The Biden administration claims our borders are secure. Do you agree or disagree with that assessment? Why or why not? 3 minutes.
Well, I know that Kamala Harris believes that the border is secure because she said so. And I don't think she's living on this planet. I think she's in orbit around Neptune. Anybody that believes that. So let's look at some statistics. Again, 234,000 illegal border crossings in the month of April this year. That was 1,258% worse than the last April President Trump was in office. Only to be eclipsed by May. These are historic numbers, incidentally. 241,000 illegal border crossings, which was 930% worse than the last May President Trump was in office. From April to September, there have been approximately 1.5 million illegal border crossings when you also add in the known gotaways. What that means is our Border Patrol is so overwhelmed with the folks that are crossing the border, they'll see a group that they can't even handle because they can only handle about 5,000 illegal border crossers in a day, and now we're looking at 8,000 and 9,000 every day. Another thing that the left-wing media will not tell you is that the drug cartels are making wild profits right now. $30 billion are the estimates. We'll never know for sure. They also charge $4,000 a head for anybody that wants to cross the border illegally from Mexico, Central America, Venezuela, or Cuba, or anywhere in the world. If you don't pay up, there's a very good chance that they'll murder you on the spot in front of your group that you're with. Now, you do the math on that, that additionally adds another $12 billion into the pockets of the cartels. Human smuggling and sexual trafficking are alive and well in this country. Slavery ended in 1865. There are sexual slaves in this country now to the tune of thousands. What they do in Central America, because those poor folks are so impoverished, is they'll say, oh, you don't need to give us the $4,000, you'll work it off. Well, how does a 19-year-old gal work it off when she gets to the States and has the cartel's hooks inside? It's disgusting, it's awful, we need to fight it. You also see it with record drug seizures, which on the surface sounds great. We're seizing more drugs. Ask the DEA about that. The more drugs you seize, the more volume the cartels are sneaking in. It's a numbers game for them. And you can see that through the opioid overdose deaths. 107,000 last year, which is the highest we have seen on record, and that's Biden administration figures. 80,000 from fentanyl alone. Fentanyl is mostly produced in China, our greatest adversary. This is asymmetrical warfare, folks. Again, not a partisan issue at all. We lost about 287 Americans a day in World War II. We're losing over 300 now to fentanyl or opioid overdoses. And now Mexico is now producing a lot of that fentanyl as well because they want to cut out the producer and make more profits. So it's absolutely false when Alejandro Mayorkas says the border is secure in a Homeland Security committee hearing, and then gets caught on a hot mic a couple of months later saying that the border is chaos. Well, which is it? It is time for articles of impeachment on Alejandro Mayorkas, and I will file those on November 9th. Because again, we have every right to secure our border, and we should encourage legal migration, of which there's 3.8 million people in the world, 95% of them are people of color, that are trying to get to this country illegally, and we're all rooting for those folks.
Thank you, Mr. Fallon. Ms. Amir, 3 minutes.
Just because you scream it out doesn't make it any more true than what it is. So, my opponent shows that even though he talks about securing the border, that he hasn't actually visited and actually saw what's going on there. When you talk about the border security, yes, more people are being seized, but people are being seized, so that means they're not just flowing into our country because they're being seized at the border and being put in holding places. But when it comes to fentanyl, and fentanyl coming into our district or coming into our state, the DEA has actually said themselves that a majority of that fentanyl is being trafficked by U.S. citizens coming back from Mexico. 40% of the guns that have been found in crime so 40% of the guns that have been recovered in crimes committed in Mexico have been originated here in Texas. And that's what the state of Texas says. So these are not stats that are being made up. This is what the findings are from our officers that are doing the work at the border. So this idea that we have to criminalize people who are fighting for their lives, that are tracking across thousands of miles to find opportunities and freedoms, what we have to do is that we have to create our strengthen our four-track system for immigration, which includes asylum, guest worker program, which especially will help our farmers and ranchers who look for seasonal workers to come here and be able to work, and then those people can go back to their homes and be able to take care of their families. We also need to look at our permanent residency program and our citizenship program, which will allow people to legally attain citizenship and also have permanent residency legally in our country. Right now, the U.S. Department that processes their immigration documents are backlogged. They don't have the support that they need to process documents as quickly as they're coming in. And with our farmers and ranchers who are in need right now of workers to come and help them harvest and plant and grow and take care of livestock, this is an opportunity for us to be able to not only increase our workforce, but increase revenue because we can be able to tax those incomes. So when we look at immigration, research shows that if we have a stable immigration system that supports people, that adequately and timely process the documents, that we are able to prevent these type of things where people are crossing the border illegally. People are able to trust the fact that we are going to process documents and they don't have to wait 10, 15 years for their applications to be processed. That is what's going on at the border, and those are the underlying issues. Along with that, we have to look at what's going on at the countries where people feel like they have to leave their countries. Because people aren't moving from one country to another because they just want to be in America.
It's time, Ms. Amir.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Fallon, 1 minute.
Unfortunately, my opponent led with another lie that I haven't visited the border. I've been to the border several times. I doubt she has in the last couple of years. I don't know. I won't say because I don't know. But I have. Yet another lie, and there's several. I have visited with Border Patrol on the border, DEA, the Texas Department of Public Safety, and local sheriffs, and they all say the same thing. It is de facto open border, and this administration is abdicating the responsibility to secure it. We have, and we've seen a political consequence to that, that Hispanics, that Americans of Hispanic descent that live along the border are leaving the Democratic Party, thankfully, in droves and coming to the Republican Party. Mayra Flores was just elected in Texas CD 34. First time since Reconstruction a Republican won that district. It's about 88% Hispanic because they're great Americans and they want to put America's interests first. Fancy that. And also Ryan Guillen, a very good man, a friend of mine, 18-year Democratic state rep, just switched parties and just got the Republican nomination. He's going to win the general election, and that's the consequence of bad policy.
Thank you, Mr. Fallon. Ms. Amir, 1 minute.
So once again, my opponent just chooses not to listen because, as I mentioned, he acts like he doesn't know and makes us believe that he hasn't been there because he's not truly addressing the issues that's going on at our border and the underlying problems of it. As a representative, he has failed to address those issues. He's failed to secure the border. He talks about it. He's been in Texas Senate. He did nothing with the border. Now that he's in Congress, he continues to do nothing about the border. We need to look at a comprehensive immigration reform that allows people to be documented so that we know who's here. We can be able to promote, we can increase our workforce by having seasonal workers that need to work on, that want to come and work and support our farmers and ranchers and other organizations that are looking for seasonal work. Those are the things that we need to be able to do so that we can be able to reform our immigration system.
Thank you, Ms. Amir. Congressman Fallon, Ms. Amir, thank you for joining us tonight. And at this time, this concludes the debate. I'd like to welcome Mr. Hummel to take it back over. Thank you, Mr. Hummel.
Sure. Oh, cheers.
Thank you.
First of all, I want to say thank you to all of you for coming here this evening. Mr. Fallon, thank you so much. Ms. Amir, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, give them a round of applause again, please. Regardless of your party affiliation, you made history this evening. This was the first time in the history of Lamar County, Paris, Texas, that we hosted a U.S. congressional debate. That's important to know because that's what it takes to get involved. For the next 15 minutes or so, each candidate will go out and they're going to say hello to their constituents, and I want to thank you. Everybody, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I want to give a special shout out before you go, oh! Okay, I want to give a special shout out to the Boy Scouts. We actually came up, literally put this together this evening at 5 o'clock. This was a last-minute thing, and they did a wonderful job. Thank you, boys. Thank you very, very much. I want to thank my friend Chris Spencer for coming up all the way from Sulphur Springs, Cass County, to lead us in our pledges. You'll be hearing a lot from Chris and myself in the very near future. Again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, and make sure you say hello to your candidates. And thank you to First Street Media.